Hello there, people of the internet. Today we're going to be talking about the nature of obsolete guns. Now, automatically, I'm sure somebody's going to go into the comments and they're probably already typing about how anything that sends a bullet and can make a hole is not obsolete. Or, by definition, because it's still made or something like that, it's not obsolete or something along those lines. The obsolete definition that we're going to be using is that better technology exists to do the same job. And better technology does exist to do the same job. And I'm sure we're going to have people go down below and say, well, it depends on the job that you're trying to do. Not really. No, it doesn't. Insert any job that you have an obsolete gun in, and it can be better done with a newer firearm that has better accessories, maybe a better barrel, maybe more modern firearms equipment or projectiles, or maybe a more modern cartridge, etc., etc. Whatever job it is that you decide to use, if you pick an obsolete gun, it could be very adequate to be able to do the job. But a more modern, less obsolete version of a firearm would be able to do that same job better. I don't care who you are or what you do or what job it is. That is the truth. Now, let's go ahead and dive right into it. What makes a gun obsolete is typically not necessarily when it was made, but when the firearm's design is replaced, not necessarily replaced, but when a better firearms design comes out that essentially eclipses that particular firearm. Now, all this being said, I know I said the job itself doesn't matter. Of course, you got to pick the right tool for the job, the right firearm for the job. Like, I'm not going to tell you to use a short-barreled shotgun to go out and do a sniping job or to go out and plink at 600 yards or something like that. I'm telling you that if you pick the right tool for the job, a more modern right tool versus an older, more obsolete design of that right tool, the modern one will be able to achieve the results far easier. Okay, let me go ahead and grab myself one of these here. This is a 303 British rifle. This right here is a number 1 Mark III. It has been sporterized. We don't really care about that because we're talking about practicality purposes, not collectability purposes. In terms of obsolete guns, and yes, this right here is obsolete because it is a manually operated bolt-action system that is fed from stripper clips, this right here is probably the least obsolete of them all. It has a 10-round magazine, which is a quite decent capacity. It is a full power rifle cartridge, which in and of itself is considered obsolete for most applications that most people would be using a firearm for, because a lower powered intermediate cartridge would be able to do whatever job it is that they need to do. Most people are not going big game hunting. Most people aren't shooting past 100 yards. Most people can't shoot past 100 yards. So a full power rifle cartridge just is well in excess whenever it comes to the capabilities and power that most people need a firearm to be able to handle. Now, if someone's going to go and argue, well, what about body armor or something like that? If you're going up against guys with modern firearms and body armor and whatnot, do not use an old school bolt-action rifle. I'm sure somebody's going to argue accuracy. These are like 4 MOA guns on a good day. These are 100-year-old military surplus rifles that have seen several world wars in many cases, along with several other conflicts that have come after that. Oftentimes on these old school guns, they're still rocking iron sights. Maybe you'll get one that has been sporterized, and you could mount a more modern optic onto it, like a 3x9 scope or something like that. But again, that is a modern sighting system in comparison to an old school sighting system like iron sights. Although yes, iron sights do have their place, I'm going to argue that I don't care how good you are with iron sights. If you're trying to touch out to a distance, a 3x9 scope will make you better. Like, no matter how good you are with the irons, no matter how much you like them, that 3x9 scope is going to be better at doing that job. Even if you're effective at using both, you'll be better with the zoomage. Everyone's better with the zoomage if they're touching out to a distance. Now, if we're talking about shorter ranges, someplace where a 3x9 scope might not be ideal for you, I don't care how good you are with irons, you're going to be better with a red dot. but just because there's less points of contention that you got to pay attention to, all you're doing is you're putting that dot on target, pulling the trigger. You don't have to worry about lining up sights or anything like that. The main reason why people fight so hard for obsolete guns to still be good in today's jobs is because they love them. I love them. I love these old school guns. As you can see from my wall of guns right here, most of them are old school military surplus firearms that would be classified as obsolete. Now I still have some modern guns too. I got over here Delton DTI 15. This is a modern AR platform, chambered in 5.56, definitely adequate for the distances that I shoot at. I got a red dot on this thing. That's my no zoom, easy to acquire sighting system on this. If I need to be able to touch out to farther distances, I got this magnifier on it. It's a 3-time magnifier, and I can touch out to some pretty good distances with that. I'd say probably about 300 yards or so. And if all else fails, I still have those good old trusty, dusty, kind of rusty, a little crusty actually, iron sights that flip up and allow me to co-witness through my red dot, so I can go ahead and use the iron sights if I need to. However, the iron sights, I don't care how skilled you are with them, lining up that red dot on your target is going to be easier than lining up iron sights. Or lining up a magnified optic at something at a distance is going to be easier than lining up iron sights. Even if you're a master with iron sights, you'd be able to use a red dot pretty gosh darn effectively too. But, although that is the more effective rifle, that's not the rifle that I would want to use in most applications. Like, if I'm going out hunting, or if I'm going out fishing, or if I'm going out camping, or if I'm going out in bear country, if I'm going out doing XYZ, whatever the hell it is that I decide to go out and do, odds are I'm going to grab some kind of bolt-action rifle, just because that's what I like. And the fact that I like it is one of the reasons why I'm going to gravitate towards it. However, just because I like it more than the modern stuff doesn't make it more effective than the modern stuff. And that's one of the main arguments that I'm trying to make here. People are trying to say that these right here are as effective, if not more effective, in comparison to modern firearms and modern accessories. And yes, that is a modern firearm. I'm sure someone is already in the comments typing how the AR platform came out in, like, I don't know, the 1950s. It's a 80-year-old design or something like that, or 70-year-old design. How do I math here? The modern AR-15 is not the AR-15 that came out back whenever the platform first existed. We have a lot of upgrades that were done to the system. The mechanical system might be basically the same, or extraordinarily similar. There were several upgrades that were done to that as well, but for all intents and purposes, the mechanical system might be the same. But now we got various rails and accessory points, and we got the ability to mount optics and lights and lasers and all sorts of stuff to these things. Just the sling system alone, the quick detached sling system to these rifles, is a massive, massive upgrade that was done to the AR platform. Versus a lot of these more obsolete firearms. Doesn't mean that the things I have here can't get the job done, except for maybe this Hakeem. I wouldn't trust shooting this thing at all. If you haven't seen the video on that Hakeem is really bad. But assuming that you have a firearm that is actually up and functional, then most of these would be able to handle most of the jobs that most people would be able to come up with. But man, you give anyone any kind of modern gun and they'll be able to do that job better. Like, for example, I'm sure someone's gonna still bring up the power of the cartridge and how they want more power. Get yourself an AR-10 then, if you don't want the AR-15. Go out and get yourself a modern AR-10, something that you can mount a modern optic to, something that you can mount whatever accessories you want to the rail system, something that you can at least mount a bipod to, something that has a free float barrel so you don't have to worry about taking the gun apart and putting it back together and having your zero shift on you, like you would have to worry about if we were talking about like a #1 Mark III, or basically any of your Lee Enfield rifles, which apparently are so great. They're so great that you can't even take them out of the stock and put them back together without having a zero shift. Or something like an M1A, I know that those are notorious for it too. Or something like a Mini 14, I know those are also notorious for it. Long story short, Fantastic guns. I love them. Odds are if you're watching this video, you love them. Odds are you want them to be good enough to be able to step up to the new stuff, but the reality is they're just not. And I hate that, and you hate that. We all hate that. I want to be able to go out and buy myself a, I don't know, a 98 Mauser, like a Car 98 style Mauser, and be able to run that as effectively as people are running modern stuff, but it's just not gonna happen. And I really dislike that. The big thing that modern guns have is the ability to accessorize and turn a firearm into an ideal platform for whatever individual job it is that you want. Like, for example, with this right here, if I want a 30 caliber round, swap out the barrel, go to 300 blackout. That gives me about the same power as 7.62 by 39. If I want to touch out to a distance, swap out, I guess, the barrel and the bolts, and you can run 6.5 Creedmoor, and then there's like 6mm arc and a bunch of other different calibers that you can shove into this particular platform to be able to run and do a whole lot of different jobs. If you want a longer barrel for more effectiveness with 5.56, you can do that. If you want a shorter barrel for more CQB purpose rifle, you can do that. If you want to be able to touch out to long distances, you can throw a magnified optic on this. If you want an LPVO or an ACOG, you can do all of that. Even if you wanted to go old school and rock iron sights with a carry handle, you can do that too. There's a Picatinny rail on top of this thing that goes the entire length of the receiver and the handguard. You can set up this rifle for doing whatever you want, whatever job it is that you decide to go with. And that's something that you cannot do with these old school military surplus bolt action rifles, at least not nearly as easily. Like, if you wanted to take this Lee Enfield, and let's say I wanted to set this up for CQB purposes, I don't want to rock a full power cartridge in a CQB rifle. Even if I did cut down the barrel, the flash that came out of this thing would be so just wild. I would have to do significant modifications to the bolt, and likely just completely replace the barrel and change it to some other cartridge to be able to handle that job. And even then, it's a manually operated bolt action system, which is not going to be ideal in that particular situation. If we're touching out to a long distance, I would need to modify the receiver in order to mount some kind of optic, or get rid of the iron sights in some kind of way to mount some sort of scout style optic to be able to touch out to these long distances more effectively. Although yes, it can be done with iron sights, you can do it more effectively with a more modern thing. I hope that me repeating myself on that finally nails that coffin, finally nails that last nail into that coffin. Because I hate it. I hate it. I hate that these things are not as effective as modern stuff, but I understand that they are not as effective as modern stuff, and that's something that people just have to come to terms with. Yes, they will still do the job, but yes, a modern thing will do the job more effectively, and that's the arguing point. Just because I have, say, a drill does not make a screwdriver obsolete. But damn, if I'm building a house, I'm not going to use a freaking screwdriver to do that job. I'm going to use that drill. However, if I'm doing something as simple as putting up, I don't know, a gun rack like what I have right here, I think a screwdriver would be adequate. But man, that drill would still work so much better. And hopefully that's a good way for you guys to understand that. The screwdriver, yeah, it will still work, but there's stuff out there that works so much better. Same thing with these right here, like the M1 carbine, however it is you want to pronounce that. For most applications that most people need any sort of firearm to do, like this is effective out to 300 yards, and most people aren't going after large game, but the 30 caliber carbine cartridge is adequate enough to be able to handle most jobs that most people would need a firearm to be able to handle. But all that being said, you get yourself an AR with modern optics and modern stuff on it, it's going to be more effective at doing whatever job it is that those guys are going to choose the M1 carbine to be able to do. I'm sure somebody's going to complain about, hey, I'm in this XYZ state and I can't use that. And that's a good, valid argument, but just because you are artificially limited on your capabilities does not mean that that right there is less effective. That just means that you can't use that, and I feel for you on that. So maybe something like this would be the better option. But just because this right here is the better option for that particular instance doesn't mean that that right there would not be the best option if you could have it. And I understand that particular concept that has been thoroughly talked about in the firearms community. Picking the best thing that you can possibly get your hands on while still following the rules. And that's probably a video in and of itself. As a matter of fact, that sounds like a really interesting video. I'd probably go with a Mini 14 or an SKS myself, as opposed to something like a bolt-action rifle. If I could manage to find a magazine-fed lever-action rifle, that would also be a really good option. Your reloading system matters a hell of a lot more than your actual operating system. Like, I will take a lever-action rifle that takes AR mags over a semi-auto AR that you have to break open and load individual rounds into a fixed magazine. That's probably an argument for another time as well. Thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. I'll see you guys in the next video. Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.